Hey everybody, it's your wandering pastor here on a early March day here in Michigan, and this has been an incredible week. About a week ago I was doing one of these and my legs were literally up to my knees in snow as I was walking around. Well, as you can see, based on what you're looking at here, we have had something going on here in the past, probably week, that has just melted a bunch of the snow. And I personally kind of like that. I've always liked the early spring when it starts to melt and everything is, just getting ready. I, of course, like the late spring when everything is popping and blooming and coming back to life. But this melt time is an important time. The rivers swell, the streams get more full, and everything starts to come back to life. And it becomes kind of a cool thing to see. The things that look dead start to come alive again, and it's a pretty awesome time. But it got me thinking, there are a lot of things that we talk about melting, like you use the phrase melting our hearts, like a puppy will melt your heart, or a baby will melt your heart. And it just makes you realize how special some of those things are, right? Well, I was thinking about that the other day and thinking about how many of us in the American church in particular may have a different kind of a melt that we need to go on, that we need to ask God to do, to actually melt our hearts in a different way. I think sometimes we get very crusty. We get kind of cold and matter of fact, kind of dry in our spiritual lives. Even those of us who are believers, we go to church and we go through the motions. We go every Sunday, or maybe nowadays we watch online, and we just kind of do what's expected, but we don't really ever have a passion for it or a zeal for it. And so we just kind of go through the motions. And yeah, I'm a believer, but what's the big deal, right? And yet here it is, the God of the universe has moved toward us to grant us life and give us a relationship with Him. And for many of us, we're just going through motions as if it's no big deal. And it is a big deal. And it's a huge deal. And I think there are times when we have to get honest with ourselves and with God and say, Lord, I need you to melt my heart. I need you to do something because I'm in trouble. I can't do it myself. I need you to do a work that only you can do. And this is one of those times. And as we get into the spring, and as we get middle of the way in through Lent, and as we start looking toward Easter and Resurrection Sunday, and before that, of course, the crucifixion and the Last Supper and all of that, it's an important time to really ask God for many of us, it's to ask God to melt our hearts, to ask God to do work in us, to ask God to bring us to revival. Because the truth is, man, some of us are we're not living a life of faith very much. We're living a life of comfort. We're living a life of ease. We're living a life that says this world is what I'm really about. And my faith, I hope, becomes important to me before I die. But, it's not that important to me in the day-to-day. And man, that just can't be okay. That cannot be okay. If you're going through that, if you're a believer and you've kind of come to this point where you're just kind of assuming your faith is okay and it probably is fine and it's not that big a deal, that cannot be okay. The Lord wants more, deserves more. He is the God of the universe, after all. And He wants us to be on fire for Him. He wants us to be passionate about our relationship with Him and moving closer to Him all the time. And I think that's one of the things that we might need to ask God to do in this spring season as we get ready to celebrate the important events of Good Friday and Easter Sunday. So I just wanted to encourage you. There is a church in the book of Revelation. Of course, the beginning of the book of Revelation, Jesus comes to several churches and he reaches out to them and he tries to get them into, or get a message to them. And he's telling them that this is a time for them to come clean. And one of the churches he talks to is a church in Laodicea. And this church thinks that they've got it all together. They think they're fine. They think they're rich. They've arrived. They're comfortable. They're safe. They've got it all right. And he says, you don't even realize that you're poor, pitiful, blind, and naked. He says, you're lukewarm and it drives me crazy. He says, I'm going to spit you out of my mouth. That's a pretty amazing thing to hear from the Lord. And what does he recommend that they do? He recommends that they repent, that they get on their knees and repent, and they ask God to do a work, and they come clean. They reject the worldliness that they've grown accustomed to. He says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and sup with him. I will have fellowship with him. He wants to come in and have fellowship with us. He doesn't want us to be on the outside with him. He doesn't want to be looking in on us, looking in on churches from the outside. You know, my mother one time had a painting in her, in our front hallway that was Jesus knocking on the door of the United Nations, or knocking on one of the windows. And it was the assumption, of course, or the implication was that, you know, the world needs to let Jesus in. Well, guess what? We Christians, we churches need to let Jesus back in. Remember that those books, those letters to the churches in Revelation were in fact the churches. When Jesus was saying, behold, I stand at the door and knock, what he was saying is, look, church, I'm on the outside looking into your fellowships. Your fellowships don't even include me. That shouldn't be that way. We cannot let that be that way. So for you, an individual believer, I just really want to encourage you. We're getting close to the time where we celebrate his crucifixion. Or I guess we should say we commemorate his crucifixion. Kind of hard to celebrate anybody's death, especially the innocent Son of God. And yet, he turned it around, of course, on Resurrection Sunday, and we clearly celebrate that. And the life that we now have, the forgiveness we can have, is because of what he did. And so if you've grown tired, if you've grown apathetic, if you've grown kind of crusty and kind of dry, I just want to encourage you, ask him to make himself real again right now. Ask him to revive you. Ask him to show you what you've done that is put him on the outside and get it right. Now is the time to ask him to melt your heart. Do it this week. Have a great one. Wandering Pastor saying peace.